Then one night, everything changed. Senior Nang woke up Grace and Agatha in the middle of the night, speaking softly but firmly, and asked them to follow her. The twins, still sleepy and confused, followed her out of their beds and into the forest behind the school without a question. Guys, I know you're all dying to find out what happened to Loom at the beer parlor inside the tree in the forest behind the school. You've all been waiting to hear what happened as the strange beer parlor people with the goat legs surrounded Loom, their wicked smiles making her close her eyes even though she did not want to fall asleep. But before I tell you what happens next, we need to go back to the beginning. To fully understand what happened that night inside the tree, you guys need to know the story behind the beer parlor and especially about Sister Grace and Sister Agatha. Only then will everything make sense to you. So, once upon a time, in a small town called Ginicum, there was an orphanage run by Reverend Sisters. One cold morning, before the sun was even up, the Reverend Sisters found a basket at the door. And inside this basket, there were 2 baby girls wrapped in a blanket. There was no note or clue about who had left them there or why. The sisters took them in and named them Grace and Agatha after the saints, believing that it was fate that brought the twins to them. But life was not easy for Grace and Agatha growing up. You see, they were identical twins who could not stand to be apart. They were always holding hands. They dressed the same and they moved the same and often finished each other's sentences. Their bond was so strong that it made everyone around them feel uncomfortable. No one could tell them apart either, and this made things even worse. In primary school, the other children whispered about them, saying that there was something off about the twins and no one wanted to be friends with them. Grace and Agatha overheard these whispers, of course, and it made them very sad. They knew there was nothing wrong with them. They just had a close bond that others could not understand. But still, it hurt and it made them feel isolated. What hurt the twins even more than being called strange was the fact that they did not have parents. They longed for the parents they never knew. Every afternoon after school, they would stand and watch as the other children ran happily into their parents' arms, laughing and smiling as they were taken home. But Grace and Agatha had no one waiting for them. They would stand there holding hands, wondering what it felt like to have parents who loved you. Deep down, they believed that their parents left them because they were unlovable. This was one of the reasons why they stayed so close to each other, because they had only each other. Sometimes people came to the orphanage looking to adopt a child. They would walk through the halls looking at the children. But Grace and Agatha were always passed over. They were never chosen. Each time they hoped someone would pick them, but each time they were left behind. As the years went by, they started to believe that no one ever wanted them. When they turned 12 years old, the Reverend Sisters sent them to a nearby girls' boarding school, hoping it would give them new opportunities in life. And the twins went to the school with hope in their hearts, believing that maybe this place would be different. Maybe here they would finally make friends, finally belong somewhere, finally not be seen as strange simply for being themselves. But Grace and Agatha were about to become very disappointed. At this school, there was a tradition. Every year when new students arrived the school, they had 1 week to find a school mother. For those of you who don't know what a school mother is a senior student who takes a Form 1 student under her wing, protects her, guides her, and makes sure that no one messes with her in the school. The girls who could not find school mothers by the end of that 1 week were called leftovers. And no one wanted to be a leftover. If you were a leftover, life at the school would be unbearable for you. It was like walking down a dark alley at night with no one to watch your back. So the competition to find a school mother was fierce. During this first week, the new students would dress in their best uniforms, nervously approaching senior students, asking them politely to be their school mother. Some lucky ones were accepted, and if you got accepted, the senior student would remove her school sweater with her name boldly written on it and give it to the school daughter to wear for the rest of the day as a sign that she was now taken. The sweater was not just a sign of acceptance, it was also a sign of protection, a badge that said, "I belong to someone now, don't mess with me or my school mother will come for you." Grace and Agatha were so excited about this tradition. It was the most excited they had ever been in their lives because it meant they could finally have a mother, even if it was just a senior student at the school. But to them, the idea still felt like having a real mother, something they had always wanted. With hope in their hearts, they eagerly approached the seniors they liked, hoping to be chosen. Sadly, just like in primary school, no one wanted to be their school mother. Even their new classmates avoided them, whispering and calling them those strange twins. It felt like history was repeating itself. Grace and Agatha held each other at night and cried. They had really hoped that people would treat them nicely at the school for once. That year, though, there was one school mother that everyone wanted. Her name was Senorita N, and she was the most beautiful girl in the school. Everything about her was perfect. The way she walked, the way she talked, her kind smile, and her generous heart. Senorita N was so caring and treated her school daughters as if they were her own children, which made every new student long to be chosen by her. Her daughters were the most respected girls in the school, always protected, and everybody knew not to touch them. But Senorita N was very selective when it came to choosing her school daughters. She had very strict standards. You had to be a certain type: pretty, light-skinned, tidy, well-mannered, and friendly. Once she chose you, she would gift you a red waist bead, and you had to wear the waist bead every day. It was her condition. And wearing one of her waist beads had even become a mark of prestige at the school, though no one knew why she insisted that her daughters wear them at all times. Grace and Agatha did not even bother to approach Senorita N because they knew she was way out of their league. But they were completely wrong. One afternoon, as Grace and Agatha sat in the refectory, quietly eating their lunch, something unexpected happened. The students had just returned from school and were all sitting in the refectory eating. Suddenly, everyone stopped and stared in shock as Senorita N stood up from her seat and walked over to Grace and Agatha. Her presence always drew people's attention, and the room seemed to freeze that day when she stood and walked to the twins. Grace and Agatha, who were used to being ignored, suddenly felt everyone's eyes on them. They panicked. Had they done something wrong? What could this beautiful senior possibly want with them? They expected trouble because that was what usually happened to them. But what happened next was the opposite. Senorita N smiled down at them, a smile unlike any they had ever received before. It was soft, warm, just like the twins imagined a mother's smile would be. The twins looked at each other in confusion, not sure if this kindness was truly meant for them. Then, to the shock of everyone in the room, Senior Nang removed her sweater and wrapped it around the twins' shoulders. This was a clear sign. She had chosen them to be her school daughters. Grace and Agatha stared at the sweater around their shoulders, speechless. It felt so unreal that they thought they might be dreaming. Whispers of disbelief spread through the refectory. They sought after Senior had chosen the two strange girls no one wanted to be her daughters, and the twins were not even the type she usually went for. No one could believe their eyes. Life changed drastically for Grace and Agatha after that day. Once they had been the outcast, ignored by everyone, but now they were suddenly the center of attention in the school. It was like Senior Nang's approval had lifted every dark cloud that ever followed them and brought sunshine into their lives. Students who had once avoided them were now eager to talk to them, trying to figure out how they had managed to win over Senior Nang. The whispers of judgment turned into whispers of envy. No one dared to call them strange anymore. The twins felt a rush. It felt good to be at the top. Senior Nang, on the first day of being their school mother, told Grace and Agatha to call her Mama, which the girls liked because they had always wanted to call someone Mama. After that day, Senior Nang treated Grace and Agatha like they were the most precious little girls in the world. She spoiled them with gifts, all kinds of gifts, sweets and pretty things, because Senior Nang was also very rich and never ran out of things to give her daughters. But more than that, she cared for the twins in a way they had never experienced. She checked on them daily, asked how they were doing, made sure they had eaten, and ensured that their school uniforms were always neat and clean and that they had done their homework. These small acts of kindness made Grace and Agatha feel something they had only ever dreamt of before. A sense of being loved, of belonging. For the first time in their lives, they felt like they mattered to someone, and that feeling was everything to them. To them, Senior Nang could do no wrong. But Grace and Agatha were wrong. What they did not know was that beneath Senior Nang's perfect exterior, there was a much darker side. Grace and Agatha were naive, and you could not even blame them because having never experienced a mother's love, or any kind of love for that matter, they did not know what real love looked like. They were so hungry for affection and attention that they would accept it in any form, even if it wasn't right. They were used to being treated badly, and Senior Nang was the first person who made them feel loved, felt safe, and they would have done anything to keep that feeling. So this is why when Senior Nang started asking the twins to do strange favors for her, Grace and Agatha did not question it or even realize that what she was asking them to do was questionable. It all began one afternoon when Senior Nang called the twins to her dormitory. In a corner, she secretly asked them to bring her a strand of hair from another student. And she instructed the twins how she wanted them to pull the strand of hair from the girl's head. She asked the twins to do it while the girl was bathing. It had to be while the girl was bathing. Without hesitation, Grace and Agatha obeyed, and they went and pulled the hair from the girl's head while she was bathing and brought it back to their perfect mother while the girl in the bathroom screamed in fear. Grace and Agatha said, "Here, Mama, the hair you asked for," giving Senior Nang the strand of hair. And Senior Nang said to them, "Thank you, my beautiful daughters." After that day, Senior Nang's request became even stranger. She would say things like, "Bring me that girl's favorite pen," or "Get me that girl's used pad." Then it got even worse. "Push that girl and make it look like an accident," or start a rumor that so-so stole something. The errands she sent the twins on grew more frequent and more unsettling. And in no time, everyone at the school was terrified of Grace and Agatha because they were becoming known for causing weird accidents. When asked about it, the twins would remain stubbornly silent because Mama had told them never to tell the truth. But to the school at large, Senior Nang was still the perfect school mother, even though everyone was terrified of her twin daughters. They still did not understand why the senior had taken them in instead of her usual well-behaved daughters. Then one night, everything changed. Senior Nang woke up Grace and Agatha in the middle of the night, speaking softly but firmly, and asked them to follow her. The twins, still sleepy and confused, followed her out of their beds and into the forest behind the school without a question. The trees there were tall, almost touching the sky, and the shadows looked like real people. Senior Nang took the girls deeper and deeper into the forest until they reached a giant tree at the center of the forest. Without saying a word, Senior Nang knocked on the tree's trunk, and to the girls' shock, the tree opened up, revealing a dark entrance. Fear almost finished the twins, but Senior Nang's voice was gentle. "Don't be scared," she whispered to them, gently rubbing their backs with her motherly touch. "You're with me, your mama. Remember, nothing can harm you in my presence." Inside, everything felt off. The place looked like a beer parlor, but something was very wrong. The air smelled rotten. People were everywhere, dancing and drinking and enjoying life. But the moment Grace, Agatha, and Senior Nang walked in, everything stopped. Everyone turned and looked at them. And that's when Grace and Agatha noticed something terrifying. These people were not normal. They all had goat legs, twisted and hairy, and they were smiling in a strange, creepy way. The girls screamed in fear and turned to their schoolmother for help. But what they saw next made them freeze. Senior Nang wasn't herself anymore. The kind and beautiful senior they knew was gone, and in her place stood an old woman, hunched over a walking stick, her legs twisted like the others. Even though she looked different, her voice was the same, just older. "This place is your home now." She reached out and touched the girls gently. "You are my daughters, and I've brought you home. You belong here with me." The twins did not fully understand what she meant. Their instincts told them to run as far away from there as possible, but they did not. Their loyalty to the senior was so strong that it kept their legs from moving. They found themselves instead following the senior deeper and deeper into the beer parlor. And as they went, Grace and Agatha started recognizing some of the people there. Senior Nang's other daughters were all there, and they were all dressed in short pink clothes and all looked strange and lifeless. All the people in the beer parlor, their goat legs twisted and wrong, had gathered and now stood around a wooden statue. Senior Nang led Grace and Agatha to the middle of the circle where the wooden statue stood. The wooden statue was half man, half goat, sitting on a throne surrounded by candles and incense. Weird things hung around it, making the air feel heavy and thick. The statue seemed to stare down at them, like a king watching his subjects. Senior Nang, still an old, twisted woman, led Grace and Agatha to stand right before the statue. The group around them began humming in a low, unfamiliar sound. It wasn't a song, but something dark, more like a chant. The sound sent chills down the twin spines. Then one of the gold-legged women stepped forward and handed Señor N 2 white gowns. The gowns looked like wedding gowns, pure and pristine, completely out of place in the nightmare that was the beer parlor. Señor N gently dressed Grace and Agatha in the oversized wedding gowns, pulling veils over their heads and then placing bouquets of flowers in their tiny trembling hands. She was so gentle and smiled at them sweetly the whole time. Everything was happening so fast that the twins could not even process it. They were numb with confusion and fear. And Señor N's smile was like a sweet song, leading them somewhere they did not want to go, but they went anyways because the sound was too sweet to resist. Then a large man approached, one of the gold-legged people, his face hidden in the shadows, and lifted the twins up, then placed them on the statue's lap, one girl on each lap. Immediately the crowd started clapping happily, cheering and whooping with twisted joy. Even Señor N's other daughters clapped along, their faces no longer blank, but filled with content, as if this was all perfectly normal. Grace and Agatha were lost and confused. Everything was happening too fast. One moment they were standing in a strange beer parlor, and the next they were dressed in wedding gowns and sitting on a wooden statue's lap, and people were clapping and cheering as if something important had just happened. The people around them were celebrating, and the girls had no idea why. Their heads were filled with that rotten smell that the beer parlor carried, and it was slowing down their thoughts, making it impossible for them to make sense of anything. They sat on the statue's lap for what felt like hours, their hearts pounding, and then finally someone came and lifted them down, taking away the wedding gown and the flowers. They turned to Señor N then, hoping for an explanation. Señor N, still with a sweet smile on her face that did not match the weird situation or surrounding, looked at them and said, "Congratulations, my dear, you just married my son," she said, pointing at the proud-looking wooden statue to emphasize who she was talking about. And then she pointed at her other daughters, who were now back to work, moving around the room as if nothing strange had happened. "All of them are married to him too," she continued. "You are now my real children through marriage. Isn't that beautiful? I'm so happy for you, my precious little angels." Her words made the girls shiver in confusion. Married to a statue? To her son? They did not want that. They did not want any of it. Tears came to their eyes as they stood there in fear. They wanted to get out of there. The place did not feel right. But Señor N pulled them close, her embrace warm and comforting as usual. She whispered to them softly, "Don't be scared, my loves. There's nothing to worry about. Now that you're married to my son, you have everything you ever wanted. No one will ever bully you again. You will have a home and you will have me forever, your mother. Don't you want that? I know my son is a statue, but he's good, I promise." Her voice was so soothing, so convincing. And the twins, at that age, too naive to understand the full horror of what had just happened, nodded slowly. They followed her back to the school, believing that Señor N, their mother, knew what was best for them and would never lead them astray. After that day, Señor N, who had returned to her young, beautiful self once they left the tree, began a nightly ritual. Every midnight, she came to the girls' dormitory, her footsteps silent as a whisper, and took Grace and Agatha back to the beer parlor. At first, their tasks were simple. They learned to serve drinks, moving quietly among the shadows. But then as they grew older, their duties changed. They were taught how to dance on the tables and do other things. So guys, this is how Grace and Agatha got initiated into a secret cult by their school mother in a boarding school for girls, and how they naively, innocently married an idol and became the idol's loyal puppets without even knowing it. The wives of the beer parlor, or rather the brides of the statue, had one purpose, and it was to bring more brides to the wooden statue, feeding its insatiable hunger for new brides. The more wives the statue had, the stronger its power grew. In return, the wives were granted the ability to slow their aging, change their forms whenever they wanted, and live in endless enjoyment inside the beer parlor. Think of this enjoyment I've just mentioned as one endless fun night out with your friends. Imagine how good it would feel to have one fun night out go on and on forever without you ever having to worry about the stress of life. That was the appeal of the beer parlor and why people all over sold their souls just to stay there forever. But there was a price. Every year on the 30th of November, the wives had to bring a new bride to the wooden statue. The statue preferred light-skinned women of a certain type, though there were exceptions like Grace and Agatha, and Siri, and a few others. The statue had been in a mood for twins that year, hence Grace and Agatha. The year Siri went missing, the statue had been in a mood for a girl who looked like Siri. No one knew what went on in the statue's mind. Some of the brides were lucky to live both in the outside world and inside the tree, like Sister Grace and Sister Agatha. But the others, like Siri and many others, there was no escape. They vanished into the beer parlor, never to be seen again. It all depended on the wooden statue's mood. Grace and Agatha managed to finish school and became Reverend Sisters, taking over the very school where their fates had been sealed. The school became their perfect hunting ground, a place where they could easily find new brides for the statue. To the outside world, the school was the safest, most sacred place imaginable to send your daughter. But they had no idea. Mind you, the beer parlor / the wooden statue had very strict rules. No one from the outside world was ever to see someone entering the tree, and no outsider was ever to stumble upon the beer parlor without an invitation. If either of these rules were broken, everyone inside the beer parlor would suffer grave consequences, as grave as failing to bring the statue a bride on 30th November. So the wives and everyone else who had sold their souls to the beer parlor through one way or another did everything in their power to ensure that the rules were never broken. But one fateful night, a tiny, stubborn girl called Loom, who never listened to anyone and always did as she pleased, wandered into the beer parlor. And from that moment, everything began to unravel.